And so whenever you talk about public relations, which is not just media relations, you need to determine what do we need to accomplish with this. Because public relations could be speaking engagements, it's media relations, it's how you manage those messages on social media, it's reputation management, it's crisis communications. And I can tell you, I know of small firms getting hit every day with types of crises, but they're not prepared for them.
You're listening to the Legal Mastermind Podcast with your hosts, Ryan Klein and Chase Williams, the go-to podcast for learning from the experts in the legal community about effective ways to grow and manage your law firm.
Today on the Legal Mastermind Podcast, we're here with Gina Rubel, the CEO of Furia Communications. Gina is a public relations, crisis communications, and trial publicity expert, formal trial lawyer, and author of Everyday Public Relations for Lawyers. Gina educates attorneys nationwide on how to implement communications planning and tactics to manage their reputation and drive business success. Welcome, Gina. We're so excited to have you today. And Ryan, I don't know if you knew this, but Gina was actually the creator of the first legal marketing agency in Pennsylvania.
I was not aware of that. That's very cool.
You are on the forefront of like what every marketing agency is trying to do now. It's like, let me work in legal marketing. What year was that when you started the agency in Pennsylvania?
So we incorporated in 2002. So yeah, I mean, when you think about it, the American Bar Association's been around over 100 years and the Legal Marketing Association's been around 40 years. I mean, if you really think about it, it's such a fledgling industry still, but we're definitely starting to make some headway. You're definitely an expert in everything agency marketing wise. So I know we really want to hone in today on PR and understanding what PR actually is and what's a story versus what's not a story, because I know there's a ton of confusion and people think there's a story and maybe they'll go pitch it to the local news or post about it on Facebook. And there's no value there to the consumer or to the news organization. So really starting off, how can a lawyer identify what's a story and what is not a story? Well, you have really vastly different types of law, and what's a story is very dependent on the type of law you practice. So if you're in business to consumer legal practices like family law, personal injury, workers' compensation, all the things where individuals hire a law firm for their own personal matters. Stories are very different than what you might find in a business-to-business firm. So, your corporate firms. But stories are things that matter to other people, that people care about, not just, hey, I'm patting myself on the back because I was named a super lawyer. And while, interestingly enough, in the B2B space, things like super lawyer and Avo ratings actually matter for things like SEO and website copy. There's no media outlet that's going to print a story that everybody in your law firm was named a super lawyer. So it's really understanding where to place the value and what is more marketing and business development and social media worthy than pitching a member of the media. Because the last thing you want to do is waste their time. Well, depends on the type of case. In personal injury, for instance, it could be when a complaint is filed. The story may be around the type of case or the egregious nature of the case. It could be a verdict or non-confidential settlement with the client's permission. I'm always going to say that because we have to remember that in legal marketing, we are bound by ethics rules. And so that's very important. A story could be that you're a resource to the media in a matter that you're not handling. So, for example, a family law attorney, let's say there's a big celebrity divorce and it's all over the news, and a local family law attorney has a perspective on it that would help consumers in that market understand the case better. That could be newsworthy, actually, because they become a resource and they help to explain tough legal issues. A news story could be a class action or a consumer law case. So again, I'm sticking with the more consumer-based things because it's vastly different than what is a story in commercial real estate in your corporate litigation type work.
We've worked with lawyers in the past that have taken on high-profile cases, sometimes pro bono, just for this PR angle and that kind of exposure with the media and that relationship with the media. So do you see that happening in your line of work?
We do a lot of high-profile litigation work on the PR side. And what we like to tell our clients is that it's very important to understand what's in the best interest of the client, because once you start trying a case in the court of public opinion, you need to be very mindful of A, the rules of ethics, and B, how it will affect the case, how it can affect venue, how it can affect whether or not the case is prejudiced. We see it all the time. We handle a lot of very high-profile litigation matters, and it's a very careful dance that you have to do. Does it get you in front of the media? Absolutely. We haven't worked with anybody that's handled matters pro bono per se, but most of the matters we've handled were contingency cases, where it's a very high-profile personal injury case, but it's certainly not pro bono in that respect. When you say pro bono, are you talking about criminal cases?
Yeah, this particular example was, a lawyer that maybe worked with George Zimmerman. Remember that case out of Orlando or Sanford back in the day, and then he started getting involved with other charges afterwards, and then some of that pro bono work for not related to the original case, but maybe like assault, battery, that kind of thing. And then they're just like, oh, I want to get in front of this guy because I know it's going to be on the news. And yes, I do agree. Most of the time it is probably criminal.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you get a good result, it's not a bad strategy. If you get a really crappy result and your face is plastered all over the news, well, guess what? It may not be your best search strategy. So it always comes to public relations is about doing the best job for your clients all the time and really understanding how things might play out.
There's really two sides of PR too, that positive press and then getting in front of something that's maybe going to be something negative in the press.
Look, from a PR perspective, everybody tends to, when we started the conversation, you said, let's define it. Public relations isn't just getting in front of the press. There are times when public relations means reputation management and keeping somebody out of the press. It means keeping a story tight and under wraps or really managing the message, which we often see in crisis communications and trial publicity. So there's definitely more than one side to that coin. In fact, I like to say there's three sides to every coin because there's a side that you roll it on. And that's really, you need to understand how anything can play out before you just go and start talking to the media.
Speaking of the media, how does someone actually start to develop a relationship with the media if they've never had any exposure before?
Well, you said the key word, which is relationship. And that's why a lot of people, for example, will use a PR agency because we tend to have relationships. But it's important to note, too, that lawyers should formulate their own relationships with people in the media that's relevant to them and with reporters that cover relevant topics. So, for example, if you're trying to develop a relationship with a sports writer, but you're not working in sports litigation, well, that's great because you like sports, but it's not going to help your business. I always say, reach out, read everything or watch everything or listen to everything that the individual is reporting on, get an understanding of what they cover. And, this is advice that's come from members of the media that I've interviewed over 20 years. Understand who they are. What does their audience want and need? And how can you help be a resource? And the first time you reach out shouldn't be because you want something. It should be to develop a relationship, to become a resource. So, for example, there's a particular reporter, let's say, in a jurisdiction where you do a lot of criminal work, and that person covers courts. Invite them for coffee. Let them know that you understand that you can't buy them coffee, but you'd like to meet with them nonetheless, because most good reporters will never take coffee or a dime from the person they're meeting with. And it's usually against their employment contracts. you meet with them for coffee and sit down and say, I see that you've covered this, this, and this. I wanted to let you know I'm a resource. I've been doing this. This is why I bring a different perspective, or this is what makes me a valuable resource to you. And here's my cell phone number. If you never ever need anything, let me know. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to have a matter coming up in about 6 months that it might interest you. Let me know if you want me to reach out. That's what developing relationships is about. Follow them on social media. A lot of lawyers are shy and don't want to be on Twitter. Well, 24 or more percent, I know last year it was 24% of verified Twitter users were members of the media. Get on Twitter, read follow them, retweet them, share their stories, share what they're writing about, show an interest. Same thing on LinkedIn and Facebook. A lot of lawyers tend to be shy of social media, but they're incredibly valuable tools for developing relationships with the media. In fact, I think it was last year, I tweeted something in particular, and within a few hours, I got a call from somebody from Bloomberg asking if they could interview me on that particular topic. And it was somebody I followed but didn't know personally. And that happens quite often with lawyers who are actively engaged in social media in a proactive way.
Just out of curiosity, did you use a specific hashtag when you posted that tweet, or was it just based off of the content of the tweet?
You know what? That one I couldn't tell you, but I do use hashtags often. I don't remember in that particular instance. I'm on Twitter every day. I'm on every social media platform daily in some way. I probably have 10,000 tweets out there. I couldn't tell you what was in that individual one at this point.
So I worked in-house for a criminal defense law firm probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And there's one tool or resource that I used back then, and it's still apparently very popular today, and that's Help a Reporter Out. What's your take on that, if you have experience using that or coming up with a strategy for Harrow or however
I think Peter Shankman was brilliant when he created that tool. As a PR agency, it's, the amount of time we would have to take to review it, send a pitch, get a response, maybe get it to the client. It's really not a great tool for us because we have relationships already. I think for individual practitioners, it's great to keep an eye on. And if you see something that's relevant, reach out. We monitored Harrow from literally the week that Peter Shankman launched it as a platform until it was purchased by, I think Cision owns it now. And, it was a great tool, but it's hit or miss. So having your own relationships, as far as I'm concerned, is a much more, much better use of time.
Yeah, I felt like when we used it, if you didn't respond to like an inquiry from a reporter within 3 seconds, like someone beat you to it already. So it's kind of tough also to get in front of them because they put it out, the question to everyone, and then people have filters, and then, it goes in front of probably hundreds or thousands of people at once. So I'm not exactly sure the criteria for them selecting who is going to contribute, but it seems like you have to be on it really quickly.
Well, that's part of the problem, and that's where I think it's a great resource nonetheless and worth keeping an eye on. And if something's very relevant, reach out, even if it's a day later, and say, look, I saw this yesterday. I know you were on deadline, but I wanted to let you know in the future I could be a resource. No reason not to use it to develop relationships even. It's just having, managing one's expectation.
Well, while we're on the topic of Ask a Reporter, what are your thoughts of distributing press releases on your own via something like PR Newswire or PR Web?
PR Newswire and Business Wire have value for the right stories at the right time. We tend to use them more for corporate stories. Let's say, for example, a merger and acquisition, venture capital type stories. They have less value in your litigation matters as they relate to the business to consumer audience. PR Web is a good distribution tool to get on a couple of good sites when it's not really newsworthy and you're not going to send it to members of the media, but you're going to put a press release on your website. So what we call a web release. And we've seen value with PR Web, and we do use it to some extent, but they're not typically the press releases we are sending to members of the media. They're more pat yourself on the back because you care, but not necessarily the rest of the world cares.
Yeah, I think one tactic that a lot of people use is they put out a press release on PR Web, and then it gets picked up on like a local ABC or NBC affiliate, and then all of a sudden on the website it says as seen on ABC, as seen on NBC.
A lot of young lawyers like to do that because they want to be seen as being important, but they have to remember that members of the media can go in and find out where they've actually been quoted. Public relations shouldn't be just scattershot, but there should be a strategic approach. And one thing in my book, Everyday Public Relations for Lawyers, we really talk a lot about strategy, in particular in the first 2 chapters, about how to identify your audience, identify your objectives, your key messages, what your strategy should be, and then the tactics. In PR, a lot of people start with the tactics. Oh, I should issue a press release, but we haven't discussed what's the objective? What do we want to accomplish? And so whenever you talk about public relations, which is not just media relations, you need to determine what do we need to accomplish with this? Because public relations could be speaking engagements, it's media relations, it's how you manage those messages on social media, it's reputation management, it's crisis communications. And I can tell you, I know of small firms getting hit every day with things like cyber attacks and other types of crises, but they're not prepared for them. So these are all the types of things that you want to go through a strategic approach to how you're going to handle your public relations, even for a small law firm. I'll have lawyers call us and say, oh, we never expected, my partner to die in a car accident, but now I don't know how to handle all the calls we're getting because people know he died. I don't know what to do. Or worst case, my partner was arrested yesterday, my business partner, for XYZ. I get that call a lot.
You get that one in particular?
I've had that one at least once a year.
That's more than enough.
And it happens, people act badly. It's not just lawyers. In any industry, it happens. And so they're not prepared for how to handle those things. And it's understanding that when that piece of news hits, especially the internet, it's out there. How are you going to handle it?
Exactly. That's the perfect segue because I just wanted to definitely transition into how to handle negative press and what kind of PR strategies you would employ when people take it upon themselves to use different websites or maybe even personal websites and blogs to say plenty of negative things about a law firm or a lawyer.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because just last week we had a client get a 1-star negative review about their employment practices. And we did a little digging and we found that same individual posted 1-star negative reviews on 4 competitive companies the same day. And we immediately contacted Google and let them know that we thought that this was, it wasn't somebody our client knew, and that here's evidence of 4 reviews almost identical that they posted the same day, and that review was taken down. Each review has to be handled differently because sometimes there's legitimacy and sometimes there isn't. And sometimes when there is legitimacy, if the attorney responds, they could be violating attorney-client privilege. And I have examples of attorneys getting in trouble for responding because then they violated privilege because they said one thing too much. So how things like negative reviews or negative press is handled is very fact specific, just like the practice of law. You said you worked in a criminal defense firm. You know that every time somebody calls, every single matter was fact specific. Well, the same is true for negative online reviews or negative press. It's very fact specific. If we can get it taken down because it's bogus or it's a competitor posting it, then that's the first route we take. If there's some legitimacy and it requires some level of response, then we might take that route. I had one client maybe 10 years ago. There was this blogger who was he had nothing better to do than to say negative things about lawyers. And he had posted something really negative about a client. The client, we let the client know, and I said, look, this is somebody who has to have the last word. And we're getting so much press on this. And this particular blog is so, I did use the words low class at the time, that I wouldn't put any stock into it. It's going to get buried in 2 days. And if we respond, we're just going to keep the conversation going with this individual. And if you notice, this individual, here's the track record, always has to have the last word. My client agreed, and we didn't respond. We just gave it no credence whatsoever. And it was buried within 2 days. In fact, I don't even think the blog still exists. You have to make a judgment call each time. So it does. Do you have other ways that you handle it for your clients?
Well, I definitely agree with not doing the follow-ups because they're just waiting. They thrive. They live on that. They're waiting for your response so they can post it. So that's the first thing. I think for us, briefly about the PR side of things, and if we see negative press, and most of the time it's not like a negative piece of content. Most of the time it's reviews. So it's pretty common for lawyers to have a Yelp account that has bad reviews because that's Yelp's MO. We're not going to talk about that, but a lot of times it's more just creating more and more positive content to push down the negativity. Sometimes it's hard to be more proactive with trying to squash the negative because sometimes it's a highly authoritative website like Yelp. You're not always going to be able to go to them and have any headway with removing or pushing down negative reviews. And then sometimes it's, like you're saying, it's a negative website. They're just waiting for you to respond. So I think it's much better to build up positivity, push down negativity as far as search results.
Absolutely. And, lawyers shouldn't be afraid to ask their clients for Google reviews or Facebook reviews or Yelp reviews. They also need to understand that having a mix of positive and negative isn't always a bad thing. We have very smart buyers of legal services today, and everybody's used to looking at reviews. And if I see a product or a service that only has 100% 5-star reviews and they all sound alike, I'm going to get suspicious, especially in family law, criminal defense, personal injury, workers' comp, anywhere where anyone's been injured. Nobody's ever fully happy in a criminal defense case or in a family law case when, their lives are changing. So there's often going to be a lot of middle of the road reviews. That's not necessarily a bad thing as long as they're balanced with other really good reviews. Now, if you have a firm that has 21-star reviews, better start thinking about your practices.
I think one way that we've actually gotten rid of some of the reviews specifically on Yelp is really looking into the terms of service on Yelp and seeing if there's any violations of the terms of service in the review, and then creating a ticket with Yelp and if you literally copy and paste their terms of service. We've had a pretty good response in getting some of those negative reviews when it's almost like too much personal information is included in a review.
And that's interesting. So we don't do a lot with consumer law firms. So we don't deal a lot with Yelp here. We work a lot with corporate firms. So more concerned about things like chambers and partners and
sure.
And other types of outlets that are more focused on speaking to general counsel. So it's good to know that. And I know you work predominantly with your consumer firms. I haven't had reason to reach out to Yelp, and my staff may have, but it's not something I would have dealt with.
So one last thing I know we want to talk about is your book, Everyday Public Relations for Lawyers, a no-nonsense strategic PR guide. Can you tell us a little bit more about the book? I know it's available on Amazon and also on your website, Attorney at Work. For lawyers that really have no idea what they're doing in PR, is this a good starting point for them?
It's a really good starting point either way, because what it does is it really helps you understand how to take advantage of every type of PR and every outlet, how to maximize media relations, how to even search engine optimize a press release so that, your web release is a little bit more web savvy than what you send to the media. To crisis communications and ethics. It's great for people starting out, and it's great for people who want a refresher, or for lawyers who want to get more business development savvy and understand how these things affect their overall business development.
Awesome. And if there's anyone that wants to reach out to you directly, what's the best way to get in touch?
They could always go to our website, which is furiarubel.com. They can follow me on Twitter at Gina Rubel, GINARUBEL. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I tend to only connect with people who I am friends with on Facebook. So I'm a little bit more private there. And certainly through Attorney at Work through the book.
So we'll be sure to connect with you on LinkedIn, not Facebook.
Yeah, well, we're friends now.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Podcasts are definitely a great way to make new friends. So, okay, I'll see you on Facebook too.
There you go.
Thanks so much. It's been great.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope the listeners get something out of it. And I'm certainly always tweeting about these things too. So I look forward to getting to know some of your followers as well.
Thanks for listening to the Legal Mastermind Podcast. If you're interested in working with Ryan and Chase, please email mastermind@marketmymarket.com. Make sure to join the free mastermind group for growing and managing your firm at lawfirmmastermind.com. Ryan Klein and Chase Williams are the managing partners at Market My Market, one of the top legal marketing companies in the United States.